until I started journaling, I didn't realize the extent of my insecurity and in how many different areas of my life it played a role until I started journaling. And I would journal about school, I would journal about relationships, I would journal about my relationship with the Lord and kind of my faith. I would journal about sports, baseball, hobbies, all that stuff. And they would all, once I got good at journaling in a sense of I was really open and honest with myself, the journaling would all boil down to the same kind of root issues, whether that's insecurity, whether that's doubt.
Your life, your journey starts now.
Welcome back to the Journey Coaching Podcast. I am Adam, and we have switched roles. Abigail is now behind the camera producing.
Hi, guys.
There we go. We got a mic for her, though, so she can ask great questions. But yeah, welcome back to the Journey Coaching Podcast. And today we're going to be talking about the concept of journaling when it comes to relationships and just growing in terms of your mental health and how it can be used as a strength to help develop some of the skills that you hope to have with relationships. Journaling was a practice that I wanted to develop to help kind of grow my own mental health. I used it as a tool to kind of help to understand myself better. I started late middle school, probably around 7th grade, and finished, I've kind of fallen away from it. But it was a good stepping stone to help me develop some of my, figure out what my strengths are, what my weaknesses are, and help me to go through my daily life and help process stuff. People journal all the time in different areas, and they may not call it journaling. If you want to go on a diet and be conscious about the kind of food that you're putting into your body, a lot of people will write that stuff down. They'll keep track of the calories. They'll plan it out. A to-do list could be considered journaling if you have a lot of different tasks for school or work. I mean, that's a lot of journaling. And so there's a lot of different forms of journaling that people use to help in their physical life and to help in action. I'm talking more here on this side where it seems kind of like a foreign concept. Some people don't like the idea of utilizing journaling to help with their relationships, to help with their emotions. And I think it is a powerful tool that a lot of people could give effort to, and they could try it. So, journaling could be in the form of recording prayers. It could be recording your own thoughts. It could be recording interactions. I did a lot of journaling around interactions with others because I wanted to have a place to help write it down and be able to come back with a fresh set of eyes, maybe where my emotions had kind of leveled out. Maybe it was an interaction that was conflicting, and I was in a position where I was butting heads with somebody. I didn't want to make any decisions out of anger or out of frustration, so I would leave the interaction. I'd give it a little bit of time. I would write down kind of the essential things that got to me, and I would then come back with a fresh pair of eyes, and I would write down kind of my thoughts around it and try and figure out, okay, is this something that I legitimately should be mad at? Is this something that maybe I took more personally, or maybe they didn't mean it this way? And then I could go back and, let's say they asked me a question of, are you working out because you look, you look slimmer? That if I could take that the wrong way of like, oh, well, I don't have enough muscle mass on me. Or I could take it a positive way of, okay, I've been eating the right stuff and I haven't been gaining weight in the wrong areas. So, but to go through and to kind of process that stuff, give yourself time to process different emotions that you may be having. I think it's a very strong thing to do, especially if you're first starting out and you find yourself in situations where maybe you're acting out of emotion more than you would like to. If you find that you're having trouble controlling different urges or feelings, and you would like to process them more. That's where I would recommend journaling. And it's a good stepping stone, because as I continued to journal, I would get more efficient at it. I would be able to write stuff down. I'd be able to come back to it quicker. I'd be able to process it a little better. And what it's kind of tailored to, I don't journal near as much now. Not to say that it isn't valuable, but I've almost streamlined the process in my own head, if that makes sense, where I'm able to kind of check my emotions in the middle of these interactions and be able to kind of hold myself to a high standard of being able to discern what is happening and what the next best course of action is. I think it's done wonders for my conflict resolution and has helped cultivate some very positive relationships in my life. So that's journaling in a nutshell. I don't know if you got any questions for me.
I do.
Yeah.
Okay, this reminds me well, this is not a question, this is a quote.
Mm-hmm.
So there's this quote that is most famously attributed to the essayist Joan Didion. I don't know if I'm saying
Okay.
that correctly, but they said, "I don't know what I think until I write it down." And so that last part that you had said almost sounds like you've streamlined the process, that you do it in your head because it's so natural to you, but you've had to do it on paper in a more manual way so you know how to do it in your
Right.
head.
Yeah, no, these are learned strengths, and this is something that's talked about in the Journey book, session 2, where you're kind of understanding your strengths so that you can best apply them to different relationships, whether that's relationships with friends, relationships with family, relationships with God or Jesus Christ, if you choose to follow that. And so I spent a lot of time journaling to help better my relationship with my family and better my relationship with Jesus Christ. And so that was a very important part. These are relationships that I had struggled with, and I had struggled to process my emotions around these different relationships. And so I really did have to break it down to the bare bones of I'm not sure how I feel until I write it down, because there would be times where I'd go and I'd write down an interaction, and when I immediately write it down, I feel a certain way. And I come back the next day and I have a completely different emotion about it. And so being able to give myself that time to be able to process it, it became a luxury for me. And so there's times today where, I still have that sensation where I feel a certain way about an interaction immediately, and then after it cools down, I kind of recognize those different points of views, and I'll go through and I'll end up feeling much different about it 24 hours. But like you said, it's something that I had to train using what some would consider training wheels in the form of journaling.
Yeah. Have you noticed patterns in your mood or thoughts through your journals?
Yeah, that it helped me to discover a lot of my strengths, and it helped me to discover a lot of my weaknesses. Kind of the stuff that I ended up revisiting the most in my journaling was feelings of doubt and feelings of insecurity. And so being able to, over time, fill out a notebook of times that I was insecure around different people and kind of be able to understand why, though that was a great resource for me to go back and realize that, if there's a lot of people or a lot of situations where I'm questioning my strengths, then it may not be a problem between me and one other person. It may just be an internal problem where if they keep bringing up the same topic, I'll use sports. Like if people questioned my athleticism and I got offended by it, if one person does it, then there's a chance then that, yeah, maybe that's a conflict that I have with that other person. But if multiple people are doing it and I'm offended by it, then there's a good chance it's me. I heard the saying countless times, if you're having a problem with everybody else in the room, there's a good chance it might be you. So,
Maybe this would have been good for our first question, but when did you start journaling and why did you get into it?
yeah, I got into it because I felt like I was struggling with relationships. And so I started in middle school. I'm not an extroverted person. I'm very quiet. I keep to myself. And so I've always been conscious about the way I present myself to others. And I wanted to get better at doing that and doing so in a healthy way. I didn't want my insecurities, my self doubt to get in the way of how I developed friendships with others because I was going into high school soon, and high school is very much a social event. I'd say it's probably 30% about the actual learning. As long as you're in a public school, it's probably 30% about the actual learning. They don't actually teach you a whole lot. But
I'm dead.
it's like 70% preparing you for the social aspects of college, of work, whatever. It's preparing you socially. And so I wanted to get better at that. And so I started journaling to try and figure out ways I could improve and how I could improve in that because I wanted to be a good friend to others and I wanted to kind of break through my own weaknesses. And so it was very much relationally driven, and I did it both inwardly first, trying to fix relationships from my own personal end, and then it kind of developed from worldly relationships to then spiritual relationships where I would, I'd jot down the prayers that I have or dreams, and I would just kind of use it as like I don't know if it's like a logbook of kind of my discussions with the Lord, like kind of that kind of stuff where you try and have that relationship because it is possible. And you talked about this with your prayer episode. If you guys haven't watched that, go watch that. But having a relationship with the Lord is a two-way street, and I firmly believe that. And so I use journaling to try and help capture that relationship in the beginning, before I built up the strength to be able to kind of do that day to day kind of in real time. So that was kind of the initial what do you call that? That was the initial motivation behind journaling. So
What's the most surprising thing you've learned about yourself from journaling?
one of the biggest surprises that I learned while journaling was kind of how the same two or three problems kind of present themselves in a wide variety of different ways. And it seems, and I'm not talking like, oh, I don't know. I don't know an example. I'm not talking like small worldly problems like, oh, he doesn't do his homework or whatnot. That there's a lot of things that go on in relationships and in your day-to-day life that one single issue could impact 70% of your daily life, even in ways that you don't think it could. And so for me, one of the big things was insecurity and being able to uphold myself with confidence. And so that's something I wanted to develop, but until I started journaling, I didn't realize the extent of my insecurity and in how many different areas of my life it played a role until I started journaling. And I would journal about school, I would journal about relationships, I would journal about my relationship with the Lord and kind of my faith. I would journal about sports, baseball, hobbies, all that stuff. And they would all, once I got good at journaling in a sense of I was really open and honest with myself, the journaling would all boil down to the same kind of root issues, whether that's insecurity, whether that's doubt, whether that's, I don't know, whether that plays towards my strengths of like, hey, I'm able to discern stuff well and I'm pretty good at problem solving. So, it was one of the most captivating things that I learned was how quickly it would funnel to your strengths and your weaknesses and how you could recognize and learn more about yourself in the process. I think that was probably the most captivating thing
Yeah.
about journaling for me.
I like that answer.
Yeah.
That was good. I liked that. Okay. Is there anything you avoid writing about or find hard to face in your journal? Like, is this very open and personal, or is it? Well, obviously
So
it is in
it
some
was
areas.
it was a lot of personal stuff for me. Journaling and any form of kind of self-improvement the effectiveness relies on how open and honest you are able to be with yourself. And so I had to be really open and honest with myself journaling. And so with that, there became touchy subjects, about stuff that maybe I wasn't emotionally strong enough to process, whatever. And so one of the things for me that I struggled writing about was from times where my parents' relationship was brought up. I was a young middle schooler who was 3, maybe 4 years removed from divorce, having to deal with that. And that's a common thing, and there's a lot of unprocessed emotions in there. Um, and so it took a lot of courage, and it took a lot. It took a long time from when I started journaling to when I was actually able to go deep and kind of begin to process those emotions through journaling. That was one of the hardest things for me to write about because it was something that was um, so deep seated in who I was, and it shaped me as a 10-year old or however old I was when it happened. It shaped who I was, and so I kind of had to journal to unravel 3 or 4 years, and so that was a tough thing, and I wasn't good at it to start, but the only thing you can do is start, and then it slowly got easier, and so I was able to be more open and honest with myself and understand that I was journaling not to bring up these traumatic experiences, but to resolve them.
Yeah, to heal them. So, going off of that, what advice would you give to someone who wants to start journaling but feels stuck?
Yeah, so journaling is a stepping stone in my eyes. It's a good, it's like a bike with training wheels. If you find yourself conflicted in kind of where you are emotionally in your life, it's never a bad idea to write it down. Worst case scenario, you write it down and it's not resolved. Like if you don't get to a solution right away, that's no different than if you didn't write it down. So I think writing it down kind of brings it to life. And in order to write it down, you have to think critically about it. And so I think it does wonders. And my advice would be if you don't know where to start writing, just sit there for a while and, just kind of write down what you feel. Don't have an end goal in mind, if that makes sense. There were times when I would sit down and I would begin writing, and I wouldn't know what I was writing about. I would just be like, okay, well, today I had steak, like for lunch, and then it'd be like, okay, well, what happened around lunchtime? And then slowly it would unravel, and I'd realize, okay, maybe, like I don't feel great, so I should probably journal. And eventually I would get down to what the true thing is. Like there's no one right way to do it. And the good thing about journaling is there's it's something that you can do in the comfort and security in your own home. Like you're not required to share your journals with anybody. If I was really stuck on something, I would share it with close friends and family and be like, this is kind of the stuff I was going through. Can you help me with this? But it's all based off your comfort. There were journals that, like I really didn't feel comfortable sharing with my close friends, and that's fine. That's stuff that you were processing. And so it's very private, and you just got to do what works for you. Like there's no right or wrong way to do it. So,
Yeah. Well, those were all the questions that I had for you. Thank you very much for sharing
yeah.
those. There was a lot of great insight in that I think will be very helpful to a lot of people.
Yeah, yeah. It's my whole goal with journaling when I was younger was to develop better relationships, and I feel like it did that. Um, it was a good stepping stone to help improve some of those relationships. I went off to. I don't think I journaled much in college, but I was in a much better spot than I would have been, and I can confidently say that. I can confidently say that I was able to develop better relationships through college and beyond. So, but thank you guys for watching. We have tons of resources that talk about the idea of exercises to develop your strengths and weaknesses over at the Journey Coaching website. I would highly recommend the Journey Coaching Workbook, which is available on our website. But yeah, you can find out more information at journeycoaching.org.
Thank you for listening. Tune in next time and make sure you like and subscribe. Visit us at journeycoaching.org and check us out on Facebook and Instagram. Start your own journey at journeycoaching.org.
Your life, your journey starts now.